Welcome to the Heart and Soul Wellness Podcast, where we inspire women by teaching applicable skills and tools and assisting them with connecting with one another, healing, and aspiring to their highest selves so they can reach their full potential. Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just so excited about this topic, and I'm so excited to have our guest with us today. Today we have Lynn Muir, and our topic today is the art of resiliency and becoming a creator in your life. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Lynn. Lynn is the creator of the blog Pocket of Paint. She started it as a way to share her love of creating and encouraging other women to try new things. Paint and power tools are her stress relievers. Lynn is a firm believer that the process of creating art using your hands to be creative is healing. Lynn is a wife and mother of 5 children, and she recently beat breast cancer. She loves making her home and yard a sanctuary. Oh, it's so good to have you. I'm so inspired by you and your work and like everything that you've been able to survive, but not just survive, you're thriving, and that's just incredible.
Thanks.
Yeah. So tell the listeners a little bit about your story and just a little bit about what's brought you to where you're at in your life.
Okay. I'm going to go back 6 years, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, 6 years ago, our oldest daughter, we found a tumor in her hip. And sorry, I'm going to get emotional right off the bat. We found a tumor in her hip, and it was slightly traumatic because I grew up with a sister who had leukemia 3 separate times as we were growing up in our childhood. So I immediately knew kind of what to ask, what to expect. You know, I'd grown up with it. And so we went through that whole process, and she had her tumor removed. It was cancerous, but it was a very low chance of returning or spreading. But we've kept an eye on it. She goes to the doctor every year and gets checkups. So that kind of started this funky, I don't know, life lessons we've been having, I guess, is kind of what we call them. So that happened. She got her tumor removed. She didn't have to go through treatments. We called it her lucky form of cancer because, you know, treatments are just so hard on your body. So we felt really blessed that we didn't have to go through treatments with her. As soon as the tumor was removed, she started feeling better and doing so much better. And we kind of moved on. And then I got pregnant with our 4th baby. After her tumor stuff was done, I kind of felt like, okay, I want to have another baby. And so I got pregnant. 14 weeks into that pregnancy, my appendix ruptured. And I was in Seattle visiting my mom with all my kids. My husband was still here in Utah. And anyway, went through that whole process. That was really rough on my body. And then a couple months, then I had that baby. And then the next year, our daughter had a lump on her toe. And I was super nervous that her cancer had returned. And she was okay. It ended up being just a bone spur, but we were so nervous that it had returned and spread down her leg, and just, you know, we made him do pathology just in case. But it was totally fine. But because she was having surgery, my mom was in town from Seattle, and I started having really bad stomach pains, and my stomach so my baby at this point was 8 months old. And my stomach started hurting. I didn't know what was going on. And it kind of ballooned up like I was about 6 months pregnant. And I thought, I don't know what to do. I'm in so much pain. Let's just go to the ER. Since my mom is here, we can just go to the ER. I think if my mom hadn't have been there, I would have tried to sleep it off, which was a huge blessing that my mom was there. So we went to the emergency room. We found out that I was pregnant again. But it was an ectopic pregnancy, and it had burst and ruptured one of my fallopian tubes. Sorry. So it was just a shock that I was pregnant in the first place. We're very careful, and I was still nursing, and it was just it was a surprise. At first we were super excited and happy when they came in. They said, "Do you know you're pregnant?" And we were like, "No, we were done having kids." Well, we kind of thought we were. And so then they came back, they sent me back to an ultrasound and discovered that my fallopian tube had burst and I'd lost a third of the blood in my body was floating around in my chest. And I needed emergency surgery. So my husband gave me a quick blessing. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then we said goodbye, and they wheeled me off to surgery, and woke up the next day, just, I don't know, in a daze and kind of talking to God and angry and mad at my body. Felt like my body had just been failing me left and right, and just frustrated. And so as these 6 years went on, everything happened in December for us. Like we found our daughter's tumor in December. My appendix ruptured the next year, that fall. And then the tumor, or the bone spur in her foot that we were scared was a tumor, and the ectopic was in December. So we kind of were in this, like, everything bad happens in December. And I was just feeling really frustrated. Like, why do these things keep happening in a row? This is,
right.
Just frustrating. So anyway, healed up from that. It was rough. We think that my appendix rupturing, the scar tissue from that caused the ectopic pregnancy, which, just bummer, but bodies are crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we were able to get pregnant again. After that happened, we just kind of felt like, okay, maybe we do want to have one more, which was risky because then I only had one fallopian tube. But we were able to get pregnant, have a great pregnancy, had our 5th baby, and then decided we were totally done having babies. I felt really strongly we needed to have that last 5th baby. And then when she was about 14 months old, we found out I had breast cancer. So I had been doing self-checks about every 6 months for the last 5-6 years, and sat down to watch a movie one night and just kind of rested my hand on my chest and felt a lump that I hadn't noticed before. Pretty large, about the size of a large grape. And then I went to the doctor. Well, I kind of waited 2 weeks and then felt like I needed to call the doctor immediately. So I called the doctor and got an appointment. They sent me to get a mammogram and an ultrasound and did a biopsy right on the spot. Thankfully, I had brought my husband with me. And the biopsy was rough. Breast cancer biopsies are awful. Able to go home and kind of wait. It took almost 10 days to find out the results of my biopsy because there was a holiday and a weekend mixed in there. So found out I had breast cancer. Because of the size of my tumor, they thought I was stage 2 or 3. And then I did an MRI and they found out I had a second spot of cancer in the same breast. So then I had to do what is called a MRI biopsy. It has a fancier name, but it's pretty much a biopsy in an MRI machine. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. And found out that the other spot was cancerous, but thankfully in surgery, they later found out those 2 spots were not connected. And the first lump that they found was 1.89 centimeters. And at 2 centimeters is when, for my type of cancer, there's lots of different types of breast cancer and types of hormones that breast cancer is classified into. So for my type of cancer, anything above 2 centimeters would require chemotherapy. And so I missed out on chemotherapy just by a smidge. I felt super blessed and grateful. So after my tumors were removed and I healed up about a month later, I did 16 rounds of radiation therapy. And then I was put into remission. So as far as breast cancer goes, I feel very lucky and blessed that my treatment was short and was able to get into remission quickly and that it hadn't spread. They had originally thought that it had spread to my lymph nodes, but it hadn't. They told me I was probably going to lose my breast, but thankfully I didn't have to. I chose to do a lumpectomy instead of a mastectomy because those two spots had not like reached out to each other and connected. So yeah, it's been kind of a wild and crazy couple years for us. But one of the things we have learned through it, starting out with our oldest daughter, Charlie, who had the tumor, she had always been just the sun is up, today is a great day kind of kid. Like the cup wasn't half full or half empty. It was like overflowing. But when that tumor hit, it was like real life hit her 8-year-old self. And it was a struggle for us to figure out how do we come back from this? How do we help her find joy again and not be anxious? She had started, whenever she'd get nervous or over small things, she would just throw up. Not that she would try to make herself throw up. She would just get so worked up that she would just throw up. So my sister-in-law suggested one day that Charlie really liked baking. She suggested that we start baking cakes. So with my she's 14 now. She was 8 at the time. We started baking cakes together, and she created like a little business, and we made her an Instagram page, and we started taking fancy pictures of her cakes. And it just brought us together in a different way than we'd ever been before. And it gave her joy, and it gave her something to look forward to. So something I talk a lot about on Instagram and my blog is being creative with your hands. And for me, that's paint and building. But for so many people, it can be baking a cake. It can just the process of using your hands. I've researched a lot, can lower your blood pressure. Even if you don't finish the project or you don't even necessarily like what you're making, just the process of using your hands to create can change your mindset. It teaches us so many things. When we mess up and we start again, it teaches us that we can do that. Or sometimes our mess ups are our greatest creations. So there's so much that can be learned from using your hands to create. And also the bonding of doing it with your child, which is something else I talk a lot about on my Instagram page, is having a creative home and being creative with your kids, or showing your kids that you are creative, because then they're more likely to be creative.
Yeah.
So
absolutely love that.
Another thing that my parents are also very creative people. And when I was diagnosed with cancer, my mom's living in Seattle. COVID hit at the same time. This was all in 2020. So my mom couldn't be there with me. But she sent me a canvas and paints because she knows, how much I love to paint. And I didn't paint on that canvas until after I was done with my treatments, but I had it in the corner of my room, sitting there. I should have probably used it while I was going through treatments, but it was just so hectic and crazy with the kids had to be homeschooled at the time because everything had shut down, and my husband's business had gone really crazy busy, and we were trying to keep people employed. So it was pretty much me and my daughter, Charlie, at the time, who was then 12, helping me just keep everybody happy. I was super tired from radiation treatments. So there wasn't a lot of time to be creative at that point. But as soon as I felt better, I covered that canvas, and it was like a triumphant moment.
I love that. It's so beautiful. It's incredible. It's incredible to think about like how much art and creating can help our self-esteem and help us deal with like difficult and hard challenges. But it's beautiful to hear about like also the love that you were shown by your mom and how it became just something so beautiful, and you were able to create something beautiful really from a lot of challenging circumstances.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in just sitting down and even with watercolors, just kind of scribbling with watercolors or with, doodling with a pen, just kind of centering ourselves for a moment in the quiet or with music. Right. A lot of music when I create, but just kind of taking that moment to recenter yourself. I feel like too, a lot with moms, young moms or moms in my same stage of life that are busy with kids, busy with teenagers, it's so good to just take a minute for yourself and be creative. Just kind of have that outlet when things are feeling chaotic and overwhelming, to make sure you take time for yourself and be creative in whatever way that feels the best to you. You know, gardening can be creative. Working out can be creative, even baking, cooking, art in any form. I have heard that working with clay is one of the best, because you're using your hands and your mind. It's one of the best ways to just kind of, I think it lowers your blood pressure. It just kind of helps center and focus you. And they've done studies on it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. There's a lot of research that shows art as well as dance and movement, yoga, are really healing in terms of healing the brain and body from trauma.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought up creativity. What would you say for someone who's like, let's say, hasn't had any experience with painting or with art, but really wants to try and practice this? Do you have something that you would recommend for someone who's maybe dealing with some fear around, like, do I even have any talents? And how do I tap into my creativity?
I get this question a lot in my DMs on Instagram. And I always refer people to watercolors, because I feel like you can take, just water and paint and paper. It's simple. And they're not too expensive to invest in. Grab those things and just mix the paint with the water and just let it drift all over the paper. You don't have to have any great artistic abilities, but you're watching the colors kind of meld and mesh together. And also YouTube. If you want to learn a skill, or you want to, say you do want to master watercolors, there's so much out there, free advice, free tutorials out there that can help you learn. But my go-to is just watching the watercolors kind of mesh together and move them around with the brush, because you can move them around for quite a while, and it's just super relaxing and it's pretty.
I love that. That's awesome. So, a lot of our mission and purpose at Heart and Soul Wellness is to help individuals with connecting to their body, mind, and spirit, and then healing from trauma. So my question for you is what advice you might have for moms who are struggling to find their sense of purpose and meaning, that may have survived a tragedy, and they're trying to get back on their feet and figure out who they are again. I know, that's I went right to the hard question.
This is something I'm still working on. Yeah. I feel like it's a work in progress. I have started going to therapy myself. Obviously, listening to those 6 years, there's a lot of trauma in there. There were times when, I couldn't hold my new babies because my breast had just been biopsied or cut into. So there was a good, or it was burned pretty badly from radiation. So it would hurt to hold my babies. And there's guilt with a lot of these things. I'm so sorry. I'm such a crier.
There's so much guilt. I embrace it all.
Yeah, there's so much guilt and trauma that comes with these things. So I think reaching out for help when you're in a place where I can't figure this out on my own. There is so much out there for you to turn to. There's cancer support groups, or just support groups in any aspect of what you're going through. Reach out to those people. I think reaching out to women who've also been through similar circumstances. I recently found another friend who's a young mom like me who is also in remission from breast cancer. We actually met because of Instagram. And have gone to lunch together. And the connection that we have is just beautiful and very sweet and comforting. It's so comforting just to talk to someone else who totally understands, the loneliness, the fear, the anxiety that comes with a diagnosis like cancer or treatments that you've had to go through. So I think, not sitting in it alone. If you feel like you're sitting alone, sometimes you just have to reach out, or you have to tell somebody I need some extra help. I'm struggling. And there is no shame in that. in any way. And I applaud women who get up and say, I need help. I need a friend at this moment in time. I think that's probably one of the first steps. And then getting outside, just walking outside has been a huge help for me. But really just reaching out and making that first step to say, what can I do?
Yeah.
Or calling someone like you who knows more about trauma and how to work these things out. My therapist has taught me breathing techniques and coping mechanisms that I never knew even existed. And they've helped tremendously. So I just think, finding somebody that you either relate to or an expert in their field that can help you is probably been, one of the best things I've done.
Yeah. One thing I'm always impressed with, it seems I've been working with survivors for the past 12 years or so. And one thing that's always impressive to me, and I'm so touched by your story, is the survival of the human spirit, that somehow it seems that there's a way that we're able to come out on the other side and find some goodness at the end of it, right? Like, not that erases all the pain or the anxiety or the emotions that you had to go through, but that we are able to survive painful experiences and then actually turn that into goodness and thriving.
Yeah.
And I mean, you were hit with so much in such a short amount of time. I mean, I was just like, one thing right after another, right? So I'm wondering what things were somewhat grounding for you, or what did you come back to that helped you to make it through such a like painful time in your life? And then, one thing right after another. I'm sure it was like, I got over one thing, and then here's another tragedy you're faced with, right?
So I think a grounding thing for me is service. And sometimes we've reached out for it or searched for it, and sometimes it's kind of fallen in our lap. But after my daughter's tumor, when we were finding out what exactly her tumor was, we had to go up to Children's Hospital, and she was supposed to drink 32 ounces of water before an ultrasound on her hip. So she drank the water, but her tiny 8-year-old body could not handle it. And she ended up throwing up all over like the special blankie she had brought for that day, her comfy PJs. And we got to the hospital and we're like, so frazzled. And it was the first time I'd been to the hospital, Children's Hospital, since my sister's leukemia, since I was a child. So I was kind of like having a panic attack that I didn't really like understand. And I was just kind of, just overwhelmed and like, what is happening? Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, well, trauma from my sister having cancer and having to now deal with my daughter possibly having, a form of cancer was terrifying. Oh, yeah. And then to have her, I felt so terrible for her. Like, she had thrown up all over everything that she had brought for comfort that day. And so we walk into the hospital, and this sweet lady in the elevator, an administrator, kind of notices that I'm about to fall apart. And my daughter looks like wet. We tried to clean most of it off before we got into the building, but weren't super successful. And so she asks us where we're going and if she can help us get there. And she did. And she's like, and do you need a change of clothes? And she gave my daughter, she was soaked all the way down to her underwear. So she gave her new underwear, new socks, new cute pajamas, a new shirt, and things that people had donated. So after everything had happened, we decided we would pay it forward. Sorry. And so we called Children's Hospital and asked how we could donate clothing. And we rallied some local businesses in our area and my Instagram community. And we were able to gather over 500 items of clothing to take up to Children's Hospital. So that kind of started us on this journey. But as each thing has happened, we've kind of found a way to do a similar thing. So we also gathered, I can't think of numbers at the moment, but I know it was probably over $10,000 worth of items for Children's Hospital. We found ball dolls to donate to the cancer unit after I had gone into remission from my cancer. And we loaded up a trailer with items that my Instagram community had either sent in from Amazon or from Walmart, or they donated money through Venmo, and we collected, I want to say it was almost 800 items that we took up to Children's Hospital. And then again, we found out about a neighbor who had her house had flooded, and in the process of repairing the flood, they found mold throughout her entire home. She's a single mom, newly single mom in 2020, and had kind of hit her budget and her limit of what she could afford to fix up her house. So her house was halfway drywalled and just kind of left in shambles to a point where she couldn't live in it anymore. So she had to move out and live with her parents. And so I called my church leader and I asked if there was anybody in the ward that needed service so our family could do service. And they're like, yeah, you could maybe go do yard work at this lady's house. And I was like, okay, kids, grab your gardening gloves. Like we called her, we showed up to do yard work. And she walks us around her house. And I was like, I know my Instagram community will jump on this with me. And I know we can rally the community and get this woman back into her home. So I did. I reached out to my Instagram community. Somebody donated drywall and had their company come and put it up and mudded. And people from the local area came and painted walls. We put up baseboards. People donated enough money for us to buy her a new couch, and people sent a desk and bookshelves, and we were able to buy her all new dishes and clean out her kitchen cabinets from all the drywall dust and all the things that had happened while she was, trying to put her home back together. So that's what we do. And we don't do it halfway. Like, we're going to jump into a project and we're going to take it all the way. And I'm going to always include my Instagram community because my community is, again, I'm sorry. My community, I can't talk. My community has become like a family to me. I call them my prayer warriors. They're always supportive of whatever cause we're jumping on. They're always sending me positive, uplifting messages about whatever is going on. They're always willing to trust me with sending me donations, which I just kind of boggles my mind sometimes. Like, I've had people send me upwards of $500 in one shot just to help with some project we're working on. And it's beautiful and amazing. And when the world just seems like it's out of control, that I know that my Instagram community is just full of amazing, beautiful humans that want to make a difference. It's really powerful. And so we've done some really cool things in that way, but we couldn't have done it without the local community and without Instagram.
I love what you're sharing, because it's like this gift of community that when we come together and rally around each other and support each other, like, we can accomplish amazing things, just like what you're doing with your community. I mean, and then all of the people, then you think about all the people that are being changed because of that. And then the change that they're going to go out and do. It's really phenomenal to think about the goodness that can come from one story of survival and thriving that then can expand out even more and more into the world.
Well, and I feel like because of the hard things that our family has gone through, I'm sorry, I'm such an emotional person. Because of the hard things that my family has gone through, we understand on a deeper level just the hurt and the loneliness and, those deep aching feelings that come with, that can relate to all different kinds of things, not just cancer. They can relate to, we understood that this woman was wanting to be in her home, raising her daughter in her home. And that, that just kind of, there's the pain that was associated with that. Like, even though our circumstances were totally different than each other, because we had both been through hard things, we could relate to each other in that heartache. Mm-hmm. And knew that we couldn't just, pull a couple weeds in her yard. We had the ability and the community behind us to actually make change. And made that happen.
It's incredible. So I have a question for you about your faith and how it supported you through challenging times. I strongly believe that, there's a lot of research that backs this up too, is that some kind of spiritual practice or some kind of faith group is very powerful in helping individuals to heal from trauma, loss, grief, all of those kinds of things that we may experience.
So I kept a lot of my spiritual experiences out of the stories I told you earlier, because I wasn't sure if that was something you wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
But I have a very deep connection with my Heavenly Father, and I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm an emotional person, but I'm super emotional today, with my Heavenly Father and my Savior, Jesus Christ. And, I talk to them very frankly. I used to pray very properly. And now I just straight up, I'm talking to God. I'm like, hey, this is what's happening. And this is what I need you to do about it. And I just have very real conversations as if he is right there, my best friend. And I've also had some just incredible life-changing spiritual experiences because I think I have sought them out and tried to look for the hand of God in my hard, if that makes sense. In my hard days, I search for the hand of God. After my ectopic pregnancy, I woke up in my hotel, or not my hotel room. I woke up in my hospital room, and my husband was asleep. And I just talked to God, and I was like, why did this happen? I'm so frustrated. I feel like my body has failed me. And I'm not really mad at you, but I'm kind of mad at you a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just want to understand. And I just felt like I had the most beautiful, calming, just the room was dark, but I felt light, and I felt overcome with just peace and comfort and just this warm sensation in my chest. And right then the doctor opened the door to come check on me, and it was like all of it just disappeared. But I had that moment where I could hold on to it and say, okay, I know God knows that I'm here. I know he knows I'm struggling. I know he knows me. And that's kind of all I needed. And, since all this has happened, my biggest, I don't know, I'm just constantly searching for the good that I know that Heavenly Father is placing in my life, because there's definitely been times where I can't control what's going on, and I like to control everything. But I know that God is so graciously just moving the pieces of my life for things to work out, and my kids to be taken care of, and work to be taken care of, and everything's just kind of gliding and moving. But I know if I'm not paying attention, I will miss it. So I try to just pay attention to how he's moving the pieces of my life and be grateful for that.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been a tremendous support to you, and that finding goodness has helped you to hang on and to continue to move forward. That's awesome.
Definitely. It is hanging on. It's just straight up hanging on, and sometimes running and sometimes walking, and just trusting that it's going to be okay. There's been times, I think, when you are diagnosed with something like cancer, and you kind of have to face your own mortality in that moment. How far has it spread, and what is this going to mean for my children? And, what is this going to mean for my quality of life? And, those kinds of questions that you ask yourself that, going through everyday life, most of the time you don't have to think about that or ask yourself those questions. And, but then bringing yourself back to you kind of, I don't know the words, just bring yourself back to trusting and knowing that it's going to be okay. And just having those straightforward conversations with God or whomever you feel you need to have those conversations with. But for me, it's definitely Heavenly Father. And I'm just very straightforward. And I also listen. And I do believe that God reveals things to me. And sometimes in just, different little thoughts or feelings. And I don't know if I could have made it through all of this stuff without that.
I have a question for you. For somebody who's grappling or in the rumble or the fallout or the not understanding and is going through a faith crisis, is there any advice or encouragement you might have for someone who's grappling with hard questions when they're in the midst of something very painful?
I would say get off of social media, get away from the internet, go out in nature and sit and have a very straightforward conversation with your creator and just tell them all the things. Our daughter, Charlie, after her tumor, well, can I tell you 2 stories? I'll try to make them quick. When I had cancer, she was really upset. She was really struggling. I think especially because we couldn't have family and friends around because the doctor told us to be super careful because of COVID. And, so there was a lack of support for my kids during that time physically to, come, like grandma couldn't come and give hugs and that kind of thing. And she was really struggling. She, it had scared her when she had her tumor, and now her mom was sick and she just wanted to know that things were going to be okay. And she told me that one day she went and sat outside and just prayed and asked God if things were going to be okay. And she said she sat there and it was just kind of I don't know, not a warm day, not a hot day, just an average day, no wind. And she said that this cool breeze just came and kind of rolled around her and then went away. And she just knew in that moment that things were going to be all right and that God knew that who we were and that he was watching over us. And that was just kind of how she took it and what gave her comfort. And I truly believe in, nature, and being in nature is so healing. And it's so good for us to just go and be quiet and just have those moments of quiet with ourselves and work these kinds of things out. On the flip side, when Charlie had her tumor, I was really struggling knowing if, my sister had leukemia 3 times. So in my mind, cancer comes back. Like, that's just kind of how I grew up. Like, once you get it, it's going to come back. So I was really struggling, wondering, is my kid going to get sick again? How do I get rid of this anxiety that I'm feeling on a daily basis? And I was just sitting in my room kind of praying, and I was upset and just kind of asking God, like, I need you to tell me if this is going to come back. Like, I need to know. And Charlie walked in and she sat down next to me and she said, "Mom, are you thinking about me and my tumor?" And I said, "Yeah." Or what did I say? I think I said, "I don't know." I didn't want to tell her. I was like, "I don't know." And she just put her hand on my leg and she said, "I've prayed to God and he told me it's not coming back." And it was just like this beautiful, sweet moment between us. And like, God had told her so she could come tell me, because I needed to hear it from her, maybe instead of just him. I don't know. But, there's just, I think just sitting and talking it out and telling him, like, this is what I need. I don't think there's anything wrong in not using the proper prayer language. Like, he's your Father in heaven. You can talk to him the same way you would your dad. And sometimes you can yell at him. And I think that's okay too. He's there to listen. He's there to be our comforter. So you can express all the emotions to him and you don't have to do it in this super proper conformed way. You can do it however your heart feels you need to at that moment.
Love that. I love that you brought up nature too, because taking time to be still is so needed right now. Just being able to practice mindfulness and reconnect with ourselves in nature is such a beautiful way to do that. I was partially raised by my grandmother, and she was just an avid hiker. And so I remember when I was a teenager and going through some stuff, she would take me out in the mountains and she would tell me that if I wanted to connect with God, that I should do it in the mountains, and I should hike and I should pray. And so that was always transformative for me, because And I love it. One of my favorite things to do now is to go hike in the mountains with my notebook. And one of the ways I like to create is poetry. So I'll go out in the mountains and I'll write poems. So
that's awesome. I like your grandma.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah,
she was a tough lady, tough cookie. She was like, she did so many wild backpacking trips in her 60s, and she was running half marathons in her 60s. And
that's awesome. Yeah, we've hiked a lot with our kids, especially since actually, when I had a break between my tumor removal and so my lumpectomy and radiation, I brought my kids down to St. George and went on a hike with them before I had to start radiation. And there's something about the red rocks in St. George, Utah that just speak to me and just kind of beautiful. I love being down here. But since then we've made it a big priority with our children to hike, and we hike a ton. And I definitely, creativity and nature are my two best friends.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I have one more question for you. Well, actually, two more if you have the time.
Yeah.
One is, I'm curious about your favorite ways to connect with your children. Sounds like it's through art. Yeah.
Yeah. My best, nature with my kids. We have some property up in the mountains in Fairview, Utah. And so it's a different landscape than Southern Utah. Very wooded and beautiful. And we call it our family's happy place. You're not allowed to fight. And if you do, go sit in the car. Yeah. Happy place. We're there to have adventures and be happy. And we've just made some of the best memories up in the mountains with our kids. And then also, we paint a lot. We do a lot. We always have watercolors on hand. There's a little cart next to our kitchen table full of art supplies. And I would say probably 4 times a week we are.
Oh, that's awesome.
Whether they're painting on their own or I'm doing dishes, or I'm sitting down and painting with them. My husband he draws. He's an amazing artist too, but the kids like to ask him to draw different cartoon, silly people, and they then try to copy him. And we just love to be creative with their kids. We encourage creativity. We let them build with cardboard, and they make a huge mess. I also believe in the power of messes and creative messes. Crafty time at our house is not a tidy time at all. But I know that they're learning so much and being creative that I encourage that creativity. So that's probably,
I love that.
One of them.
And then I think my last question was, anything else you'd want to share with women who are listening to this podcast who have recently received a diagnosis of breast cancer or another form of cancer that have lost hope and are struggling with, processing and figuring out their next step?
I would say for them to ask their friends if they know anyone who's had a similar diagnosis, and then ask if they can have that woman's phone number, or to text them or call them or send them a message on Facebook or Instagram, and just reach out and say, hey, I was just diagnosed with this. Would you be willing to sit and talk with me? Mm-hmm. Especially for those who have been through it and come out of it, there's so much hope given to sit down and talk to another survivor who's been through what you've been through and say, okay, I can do this. I can get through this really hard thing because she did. And it's just comforting to talk to someone else who's been through and come out of what you're about to go through.
Right. Seeing somebody else's story of hope can inspire you and give you the faith to keep on moving forward.
Yes. When I was diagnosed, I talked to my kid's principal just to let her know what was going on. And she said, have you talked to this lady at our school? And I said, no, I didn't know she had cancer. She said, yeah, she had breast cancer and thyroid cancer. Can I give her your phone number? And I said, yeah. So she reached out to me and she invited me to her house, and we sat and talked for almost 2 hours. And I left just feeling still terrified, but also like, okay, I can do this. I can rely on all the things that I have already learned in my life, my faith, my relationship with my husband, my family, my stubbornness, and I can get through this. And it was just very comforting to talk with her. And then too, to kind of get a game plan of, okay, how am I going to talk to my children now? How am I going to, because tell my friends, like those are all really hard things that you have to confront when you are diagnosed with something like that. And I just think there's so much power in togetherness.
Yeah, incredible when you can come together with others who have been through it and reach out for support. Our tendency is to isolate, but it's so important that we are united with one another.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we feel like I'm alone in this. I'm so alone. So I think it's so important for us to realize that we're not alone and to not sit in those lonely feelings of, it's isolating. It feels really isolating. And just to remember to reach out to people who have possibly been there before you, or ask friends if they know of somebody who's been there before, and sit and talk with them and hear their stories of survival. And it just gives you hope. You're still going to feel that scary feeling of I'm heading into this daunting task of, cancer treatments, but just knowing that other people have come out of it. And then you have this special bond with them. And from my experience, most of the people that I've talked to that had been through cancer before me then continued to kind of be like, hey, I know you had a scan today. How did it go? And you just have that person who understands to kind of check in with you. But also, if I could also just mention just the power of women and the power of friendship. And I have this very special friend, moved into my neighborhood a few years before I had been diagnosed. And she called me every day. She just called and said, how are you feeling today? And there were days where I don't have words. And she'd be like, you feeling like this? And I'm like, yeah, kind of like that. And I think just the friendship and just the power in sisterhood can just really helps. Just don't sit in the loneliness. I know that's kind of the feeling, that's kind of where you want to go, but it'll be so much better if you don't.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's just, I know it's going to touch so many people, and I'm just so grateful for your resiliency and your connection and your community that you have and the difference that you're making in the community.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope that it does help somebody. I hope that people out there just know that they're loved and that there's people cheering for them and praying for them. And, life is really hard. Life is, I call it a stinky turd. Like, it's hard, right? And to get through it, unscathed would be amazing, but we're all here to learn. We're all here to grow. And I truly think that, I wouldn't be doing the type of service projects I've done or, necessarily having that type of compassion if I hadn't have been through some really crappy things. It's made me who I am. And even though I'm not grateful for those trials, I don't like those trials, I am grateful for what I've learned and who I've become because of them.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And then I will include the links for your website and then your Instagram page. So, great. So if anybody wants to get in contact with you, they can.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Heart and Soul Wellness podcast with your host, Sarah Carter. Make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any thoughts about what we talked about today, leave a comment. Also, you can find us at heartandsoulwellness.org and on Facebook and Instagram. Join us again as we continue to help women heal, connect, and aspire to their true and authentic selves.